So again, you would start right whole class. I've seen people doing the morning meeting is what they're calling their concurrent teaching time. And that means that kids at home and kids in front of you are hearing the same thing at the same time. Then what you might do is, let's say that Jeff, George, and Justine are in group or cohort A. They're in front of me in the classroom right now. And then Gina and Leanne, you're in cohort B. You're at home remotely. Mm-hmm. Those people who are in the classroom with me for those 2 days are going to do stations 1, 2, and 3. They're going to do a demo with the teacher. They're going to do an intro of no skills with the teacher. They're maybe in station 2, they're working by themselves and doing a science investigation, right? We have the materials to be able to do that at the elementary level, definitely. And then in station 3, they might be doing some group work, practicing on those specific skills. Now, these 3 stations are not 10-minute stations, right? They're going to be a little bit longer because they're going to take up those 2 days. Now that Leanne and Gina have gone home, they're now working remotely. Justine, Jeff, and George are now in the classroom in front of me. Now, Leanne and Justine, sorry, I got that wrong. Leanne and Gina, they're at home. They're doing stations 4, 5, and 6. They have 2 days to do this work. Whereas the people who are now in front of me are working on station 1, 2, and 3. So it's just the idea that you're kind of planning these smaller lessons and the students are rotating through them. This is going to give you that one-on-one time you need in whatever this direct with teacher station is. You're still going to be able to do the content delivery when they're all together, but it's going to allow for that group work that we talked about here with the in-person with in-person with remote, or remote with remote. And you'll be able to, we think, better monitor and assist students with technology issues or whatever they're having if they're working in these smaller groups. Questions on how? Yep, go ahead, Gina.
I have a question. So what about the students who are completely remote, where they won't have any hands-on with 1, 2, and 3?
So those students who are completely remote, the first thing we want to remember, right, is this is what their parents have kind of chosen for them. They do have the materials in the elementary school that have been sent home. So maybe you could think about your investigations or using those materials so they'll still be able to do the station 2. If you're doing the teacher demo, what you'll do is have that student watching you directly. So they'd still be in station 1, right?
Okay.
They'd just be at home watching you rather than in the classroom watching you do it.
Okay.
So you might have a desk with a computer on it, and there's that student who's remote at home. For those students who are choosing to stay full remote, does that make sense?
Yes.
And in terms of the materials, as Christine said, hopefully the elementary schools have sent the materials, the packets that we've done. Mm-hmm. If kids are working in the classroom, then hopefully enough of them are bringing those packets back to school so that they can use those materials back at school. Even if not everyone does, if we have enough, we should be okay.
And there is guidance coming out. I'm just getting it finalized today, actually. So you'll see that next week on what does it mean to share materials in a classroom? What are some things that we have to think about if we are sharing materials? So George, at the high school level, the department heads will be presenting that to you. And at the elementary school level, those will be coming from your coach so that you'll have that guidance that the district is saying this is kind of how you might think about making sure we clean and sanitize before moving on to the next student. But the station rotation model would work with that. Am I okay to move forward?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that's just thinking about hybrid. So now that we're thinking, okay, this is what my classroom might look like as I move into hybrid, or if I'm still remote, now we're really getting into the formative assessment piece. All right, Jeff.
So the first thing we want to think about is when you hear the word assessment, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? What do you think about?
Test.
Okay, so great. Just throw it out there.
So I heard someone say test. What else?
Yes, that's what I was going to say.
Evaluation.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Great.
Formal or informal.
Nice distinction.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Any other thoughts?
What do you think kids might say if you said assessment?
They'd
Test.
say test.
Right?
Give me
MCAS.
gum so I can chew and make it through it.
Perfect. Accommodations. That's what I'm hearing there.
In terms of how they would approach it, what do you think kids would think in terms of, okay, we're going to do an assessment today? What would their thoughts be?
Ah.
Okay.
It's managing expectations. You hear assessment, I immediately run to my daughter's fear of MCAS.
Uh-huh.
Too much pressure.
Okay, good.
I think if it's presented to them as saying, this is what we reviewed, I want to see how you apply it to see what you've been able to fully understand.
Great. So let's take a look at the next slide. And we're talking today really about formative assessment. And the distinction is that formative assessment is not of the learning, but it's for learning. So we're now getting away from that pressure. We're now getting away from that fear of the MCAS. We're saying we're not assessing what you know. We're looking so that we can better learn. And typically it can be very short. The purpose is so the teacher can adjust their instruction to meet the student's needs. So I can do an assessment and then just pivot. I hate that word, but pivot and do something based on the feedback that I've gotten. The other thing I like about formative assessments is I can give feedback right away that will change the course of that class. Formative assessment shouldn't be included in a kid's grades. We're not assessing for grades, and it's also not to be judging how a teacher is doing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really to improve student learning. So that's what is a formative assessment. Why do it? Why do we do formative assessments? So 50 years ago, and I love the idea that we had people thinking 50 years ago, and it's still taking us all this time to make some headway. But 50 years ago, this psychologist said that good teaching starts where the learner is, rather than where we would like him or her to be. So finding out where is the student, not where do we want them to be, but where are they actually? If I'm doing a formative assessment, I might find I don't need to teach the topic at all. Maybe we're already good with it. Or I can find where students have some, instead of misconceptions, mixed conceptions. What do they have right and where are they maybe a little bit off? This can also help me to differentiate instruction. Formative assessments, I got this out of a book that we had to read for our group. They should be done not only for the teacher to make some learning decisions, but also so that students can make learning decisions, so that the student can self-assess and use that metacognition to see where it is that they feel they need to go.
So when we think about formative assessment, really it's not the activity itself doesn't make it a formative assessment. So NSTA probes, if you know what those are great ways to do a check for understanding or a formative assessment. Your do nows, your exit slips are all great ways to do formative assessments. But those things in themselves are not formative assessments unless we're taking the next step. And that's really what this is about, right? How are you collecting that data? So if I'm giving a formative assessment, how am I collecting the information on how the students are doing and how they're responding? What data, what information am I collecting? And then what instructional decisions are you making based on that data? And this is really what makes something a formative assessment, is that you're going to have a next move. You're going to do something based on the information. It's not that end of the unit test, right? If I'm giving a formative assessment, let's say on plant cells versus animal cells, or some information around there. If I find that 80% of my students are answering this formative assessment correctly or have the right thinking, then I know I can do a small group. That would be my next move. And I'm going to take those 20% who weren't so sure, and I'm going to do some small group instruction with them. And I'm going to allow the other students to move forward. If I find that only one or two folks are confused on the concept, then I'm going to do some one-to-one teaching. I know that the rest of the group can move forward with whatever activity it is, and I've planned some time in my lesson to do one-on-one with those students who maybe don't understand and they need that direct instruction again. If I'm giving a formative assessment and 80% of the students are not understanding, they're not showing me that they understand the concept, then I need to go back and do a whole group reteach. This is really what makes something a formative assessment, is as I'm giving this, I can quickly see, Do I need to just go back and try again with the whole group? Is there just one small group of students who needs to have some more instruction, or is it really a one-to-one thing that needs to happen? And again, what Jeff is saying is, do you make visible to students their own self-reflection opportunity here? So as I'm collecting data on whether I think they've understood the concept and they've mastered the concept, and they're ready to move on in their learning, am I allowing students to also make that same self-reflection and say, okay, where do I think I am on this? Do I think I'm ready to move forward with my learning? Or do I think I need a small group, a one-to-one, or a whole group reflection? Any questions so far on what we are saying, what it is, why it is, or how to use it?
What do you do if a student says, no, I'm not ready to move on, but your numbers say differently?
I would
Yeah.
honor that and ask them why. So, right, like, what is it about this that you think you're still confused on? You know, explain to me where you think you need more assistance on, but honor that. If they're going to be reflective, I would honor that and see if they can explain to you where they think their misconceptions are.
Okay.
Remembering that it's not a grade, right? So if they want a little more information, let's give it to them.
So there are lots and lots and lots of ways of doing formative assessments. And I meant to bring it over for my bookcase, but I've got a book, 75 Ways to Do Formative Assessments in Science, which is a great book from NSTA, which can be used for all subject areas for folks in elementary. We're going to take a look at some of those here. So we're going to take a look at a very, very short video clip. And what I want you to do is to see if you see any formative assessments happening. And if you do, just jot them down. And if you don't see them, that's okay too.
Is the sound okay?
Not yet. Okay.
If everyone could go mute, it'll be better.
And on your board, can you find one angle? Watch what I want you to do. And in the middle of the angle, just draw an arc. Looks like that. Find one angle on your board and draw an arc. Hold it up when you have one. One angle on your board and draw an arc. Good, good, good. Nice. Are there more than one angles on your board?
No.
Yes. See if you can find another one. And if you find it, what do you need to put in the middle? Put the arc in the middle. Good, good, good. Nice, 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 nice. Yep. Perfect. Logan, you got it? Yep. Lila, you okay down there? All right. Real quick review. Don't erase your board. Tell your neighbor, what's a point?
Somewhere in space. Yeah, somewhere in space.
Excellent. I heard an exact point in space. Perfect. What's a line segment?
Part of a line. Part of a line.
What's a line?
A line that is something that goes on forever.
What's a ray?
A ray is when you have a point at the end and an arrow going up. It's like the end of the segment.
And remember, a ray has one endpoint and one arrow. And then finally, what's an angle? Two rays. Okay? Awesome job. Erase your boards.
Here we go. What formative assessments did you see, if any?
The whiteboard.
I'm sorry, Leanne?
Yeah, the whiteboards that she
So
could just
you-
have hold it up and she knew right away who had it and who didn't.
Great.
Peer discussion?
Peer reflection, is that what you said, Gina?
Yes.
Yeah, good. I think that the whiteboards are a great way to go, and I used to call it show what you know.
Yeah.
And I'm old enough now that when I was first teaching, I actually had little mini chalkboards before I had whiteboards.
You're showing your age, Jeff.
I know. But that show what you know is very useful. And you could see how quickly the teacher could look around the room,
Yeah.
see what was happening, and give immediate feedback to kids. She also was able to, in one instance, clear up a quick misconception and address one of the students, all happening at once. The second thing I think that was mentioned was that idea of that turn and talk or peer work. And again, the teacher's in the room and able to hear what's happening. That second one might be a little bit more tricky in our present situation, but hopefully not forever. But the teacher can hear what's going on. She again was able to say, okay, I can see some stuff that's good. I can see some stuff that needs addressing. And it was instant. It was quick feedback and letting her adjust to her teaching.
And Jeff, would you say that the students also knew whether or not they were getting it? Was there time for them to say, okay, I've got it?
It certainly seems so, right? And the kids were helping each other as they were talking. Oh yeah, it's got an arrow on both sides, or it's got an arrow on one point and an end point on the other. And so they were able to talk it out. And if someone really did have something wrong, hopefully the other student was able to work with them.
They also modeled it with pictures.
And the pictures is a great thing to mention, Justine.
But
So
I do that with in virtual world. I just watch their lips. So say if I know I'm looking for a particular word, I'll say 1, 2, 3, and they all say it at the same time. I'm watching to see who, and then I'll say, okay, so and so, what you said. And so then you say the one you didn't see move their lips. You can say, okay, repeat what so and so said. So you can you're still doing all the same things you always did. You're just learning new tricks.
Yeah, exactly.
They could hold up a piece of paper with whatever they think is on there, right?
Yeah, or you let them open. You open
say
the
the
chat.
camera's on.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
So you just do a whole different way of doing it, and it's just all the same thing.
Yeah. Oh, good. This is good teaching, and I think that most of us don't wait until the final test. Most of us are all along checking to make sure that things are progressing the way they need to progress, and not waiting for that summative MCAS type exam. We're doing these quick things. So here are just some examples of some formative assessments. And as I said, there's that book, and I can get you the title. But thumbs up. We're all doing that, especially online. A traffic light in the classroom with red, yellow, green. How do you feel? Take your sticky note and put it on where you feel you are, either with names or without. So I feel like I am really good to go. I'm putting my sticky note on the green. Or I think I'm in the middle. I'm putting it in the yellow rather. Or I'm like, help, I need to go back, put it on the red light. Postcards, having kids writing postcards. Oh, we skipped. That's okay. The whiteboards we mentioned, doodle it. Have kids drawing, like you said, the modeling that we saw. So have them draw it. Exit slips, Christine had mentioned. Human thermometer. Raise your hand all the way if you feel like I'm really good. I'm hot. Halfway or just above means that I'm cold. I need some more help.
And I think, Jeff, this is great because some of these are self-assessment and some of these are direct teacher content, right? And so there's just this mix of both. And so some of these are meant for a student to say, okay, this is where I think I am. And some of these are more for a teacher to say, this is where I can see you are.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So we're going to try one that you probably have done, but I do feel like it's a good, easy assessment. And it's called first word, last word. So in this case, the word that I chose was photosynthesis. And what students do with first word, last word is you give them the topic of the word, and they write down everything they know about that topic. And we want them to be showing us content. We're not looking for them to say, plants are fun, I like plants,
Right.
Plants are cool. we're getting them to give us content. And this is before we've taught our lesson. This is our formative assessment. I can look and see what George knows about photosynthesis. I can see where Gina has maybe got some mixed conceptions about the role that sun and water play in photosynthesis. Then what happens with first word, last word is after I've taught the lesson, we're going to look at that same word. They're going to either add in another color. So I'm going to add more information in another color. Or maybe I'm crossing out with a line some of the things that I thought earlier. I'm not erasing because I want to be able to see my own growth, and the teacher wants to be able to see the growth. So I'm not going to erase my earlier thinking, but I'm going to have it so that I can add to it and compare.
And it's a great way to see if kids can use that vocabulary yet. Have they internalized it?
So we're going to just take a minute, and we picked a standard which was on measurement and observation of substances. So we're looking at characteristic properties. So some of the properties would include color, hardness, reflectivity, electrical conductivity, thermal conductivity, response to magnets, or solubility. What I want you to do is to pick any one of those words and write down what it is that you feel you know about that in terms of the standard.
So it could be property. You might choose color. You might choose magnetism. Choose one of those words and do first word. Correct, Jeff?
Correct. And you're writing it, thanks. You're writing it as an acrostic. So you're writing it down just like we had the word photosynthesis. In just another 30 seconds. We'll pretend you had enough time. All right, let's, as I said, let's pretend that we had enough time. And this is our formative assessment. So with students, we would expect that we would see some holes perhaps, or some things that are not quite right. Would people like to, we've only got 4 of us, would people share their word and what their first thoughts were on that word?
Go
Great,
ahead,
Justine.
Justine.
So I picked magnetic, and I only was able to get 3 of the 4 of the letters. The G I wrote great way to see if it's magnetic. The N I put north end. The T I put 2 poles, and the C I put connects to objects. That's as far as I got.
So as a teacher, I'm learning a whole lot about what you know about magnets. The idea that you had the 2 poles, the idea that one of those poles is called north, the whole idea of attraction. So I know exactly, just from that 2-minute first word, what it is that you know. And I also know that there's some room for growth because you weren't able to complete, let's pretend you had the time, that you weren't able to complete the acrostic or the first word.
And even that you didn't use the word attract for A, right? Instead, you described what it was. So like what vocabulary might be missing.
Somebody else?
I chose hardness,
Great.
and it was related to how is the material going to be used? What's the appearance? Rockwell is a specific test for determining hardness. Dent, whether or not it can be dented. Needs, what are the needs of the application, the material, where it's going to be used. E, expense, how expensive is the material? If I can get away with a piece of paper versus a diamond, I'm going to do that because it's costly. Scratch resistance for scratch, because if you apply, it's like if you had an old vinyl record, if you clean it with the wrong cloth, you're going to scratch the dents, the marks in the record, and then selection, properly selecting the right material for the application.
So again, George, as a teacher, look at what I've learned about what you know about the topic. And in some instances, that type of test, you know more than I know. So
that tells me you have an engineering, like you have some engineering and manufacturing information in your mind, right? So that's what you can glean from this, which is great.
the other thing I want to mention is the fact that when you explained each of your words that you put on there, I'm getting more information and I hear how you're using the words. So I just feel that this is good. This is good stuff that you're giving me. Gina?
I like this, but I just find it's going to be very difficult for the ELL students, especially with vocab. I don't want to set them up for failure in the beginning, already wanting to give up if they have no idea about words to put down for vocab.
So part of my thinking in terms of that is that in science, I feel like we're all English language learners to some extent.
Mhm.
And we're all coming into some of these words without having a lot of background. So if I say thermal conductivity, I'm going to have, 2 kids out of 24 that really have seen anything to do with that word. I want to make sure I'm building a culture where it's fine that if I give it some thought, it's fine to have blanks and it's fine to use those letters to say, I don't know anything about this, and putting that in my acrostic. This is a formative assessment. And so if you don't have the vocabulary, great. That's something we're going to be focusing in on.
Yeah, Gina, I think it's really about that pressure thing again, right? Letting students know this isn't a quiz. You don't have to show this to anyone else. This isn't going to be announced to the class. This is just your thinking about yourself. What do I already know, so that I can see what's in your head? And then at the beginning, I don't expect anyone to know anything. I've done this with my students at Tatnick, where we did have, our percentage of EL students, and they'll surprise you with something, and allow them to use their native language. If they want to write a word in their native language, go for it. Show me what you know.
Also, they're probably going to not use the right letter in the right spot. Doesn't matter. You're really just listening to what they know. So more than likely they are going to have the wrong letters, but that's okay. What did they say?
The beauty of formative assessments is it's okay. We want to just see where we are. We have a stop and reflect here. How could you use this in a hybrid learning model? So how could we do this if and when we're hybrid? So just think about it for a minute. George?
Pretty much any time. That's the thing. It's universal because to me, I guess this expands the, and again, the English side or the language side, because as you said, you're learning a new language. I have that same problem when I have to and I'm going to, hopefully there's no math teachers here, when I have to reteach rounding in terms of how the physics book tells them to do it versus how they've learned in the earlier grades, because there's 2 different methods. And so learning a new language, whether it be a physics language, and converting with their base knowledge in math and just building on that in the physics side, because most of it's the same. It's tomato, but it's still bridging the gap between them. What's good about this, I see, is that there are virtually no wrong answers. If someone gives something that and I'll use the word color, or actually I'll use the word reflectivity when it comes to physics. If someone says, oh, it's how I think about something, or T for thought process, like, well, okay, that would be good in this circumstance, but what does it tell you about reflectivity as far as how light bounces off of something? So that's about the only way I could see them being not completely correct. But again, as your word earlier was pivot, how do you twist it around for them to get redirected into the physics mind thought of the science mind space instead of the liberal arts side? Sorry.
People that know me know that I'm the low tech, and this is certainly low tech, and it's something that kids, whether they're at home or in front of me in the classroom, can do either on a whiteboard, on a piece of paper, on a Google Doc. Really varies.
Yeah.
I think we should move on just for time.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, so now we're looking at some tech tools, right? And so the first thing that we're going to start with is a card sort. And I'm going to have you working in a shared slide deck. I'm going to put this right here in the chat. All right, so go ahead and link into this shared slide deck. And I'm going to present it up here. And so again, I'm going to show how I might use this shared slide deck as a way of formative assessment. So I am assuming that we are coming into, this biology class and that we have done no work on symbiosis yet, right? So let's pretend that's where we are as students. And I want to see what you might do with the information that you have, because what I could be assessing here as my formative assessment is how you actually use information to make decisions. It might not be on symbiosis at all, right? That might be how I use this at the end of the unit for a formative assessment. So Justine, I want you to work on slide 2. Jeff, you're going to be slide 3. George, you're 4. Leanne, you're going to be slide 5. And Gina, slide 6. So go ahead and go to your slide. And again, right? Go ahead, Leanne.
I didn't get into it.
It's the link in the chat.
Oh, okay. You know what? I missed it. Okay.
That's okay.
Hold on. That's all right. I'm a little, I'm not the tech Okay. Yeah,
Leanne,
got it.
I got it. How much you've learned.
Yeah, I was clicking on the one that's on the shared screen, so don't worry.
I was too. I was doing the same thing.
All right. So you could see as a teacher, what's great about this, right, is I could see your little circles. So I know who's on what slide, which is great, right? And then I can say, okay, go ahead and move them around and try to match them. So there are 3 relationships. Do you think you can match the organisms together to show me the symbiotic relationship? Now, as a formative assessment, I'm just going through, and I'm now clicking on the wrong screen, by the way. And I'm going through to see what folks are choosing. I might ask a question, right? If I see this, I might put a comment in and ask a student a specific question to see what their thinking is, to see their sense making. But again, for me, it's a really quick way to see, okay, as a card sort, can you make the correct relationships? Okay, and if this is at the beginning, again, I'm not expecting you to have the correct answers, but at the end, maybe I am. And so it's a really quick way for me to see who's ready to move on. Now, in this case, I would say, okay, it's definitely time for a whole class reteach because we don't have a lot of correct answers, and that's the information that it gives me. George,
Me being well, go ahead. Just keep going. Forget it.
No, it's okay. What's up?
We all did that bad?
Well, I'm just saying not everyone has the same answers, right? So that tells me that, okay, I have to think about what's going on. But again, that making it the formative assessment, the key here is that I'm making a decision very quickly based on the information that's presented to me and that I've planned for it beforehand. So this might be what I give at the end of class, right? So that I know where I'm going to move tomorrow. This might be at the beginning of class, so I know what I'm going to do during that lesson. But I'm making these plans beforehand if I need small group, full group, or one-to-one.
You just said something that's really important, I think, is the idea that we do want to make sure that we are adjusting our teaching based on what we're finding.
Yes.
It's great to get the information, but if we teach the lesson we had prepared just the way we had prepared it after doing this, then why do we do it?
It's not a formative assessment, then it's just an activity.
Right.
What makes it that formative assessment is that I'm doing something based on the data that I'm collecting.
Yeah.
So I'm going to show you 2 others. We're not going to go through them, but here's how you might use a Google Doc. In this case, if I'm using Classroom, and I think everyone here is using Classroom, I don't think there are any pre-K, K, or 1 teachers. I can actually see in Classroom all on one screen how folks are responding to answers. So I can look at everyone's doc on one page and see very quickly how they're responding. So that's just one way you could use Google Classroom. And then, of course, you have your modeling, which we love in science. So this is a diagram, and having students, right, moving the correct organelle to the cell structure. I'll very quickly be able to see what they're being able to do, and then move from there. All right. Any questions on card sorts? I have a feeling these aren't as novel as they were, right, when we first started. Now, there's also card sorts that you could use that are non-tech. So I know in my classroom, I used to have paper cutouts, and I would have the kids push the paper around, right? So put all the things that are in a plant cell onto the left of your desk, put all the things that are an animal cell to the right of your desk. And kids would literally move the cards on their desk.
Yeah.
So those could be coming back now as we move more into hybrid learning. So stopping and reflecting, how do you think you could use this in hybrid learning? Is this something you could see doing?
If you learned how to make the card sort, yeah.
Justine, I can send you a video that has some directions on how to do it. It's just about putting in images rather than text boxes or drawings so that the kids can move them.
Yeah,
So I'll send you a video.
We're still talking a foreign language, but yes, please.
Christine, could you do that for me as well?
Yeah, I'll put it in the follow-up
Thank
email to
you.
everyone.
I mean,
Absolutely.
we could all tell our ages, and then you'd be able to know who knows
Yeah.
what.
The other thing is, folks, there's just a small group of us. If Chris sends you the video and you look at it and it still doesn't make any sense, we can do a real quick, 1 hour or less workshop on just card sorts, virtual, online.
Christine, add me to that list as well.
So this is a formative assessment though, right? So what am I seeing? So from introducing something, right, as the instructor, I can say, okay, I know that this is a skill that's missing, so I need to do this follow-up. And so it's just
You
a
also
formative
said that
assessment
there's
for
a
me.
way to look at everyone's doc at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, would that make my life easier.
So what I'll do is I will send a follow-up email with some times, and what I'll do is I'll put you all in a classroom together with me so that you're all my students, and then I can show you what that looks like. But I can't show you what that looks like unless we're all in that same virtual space. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yep.
When I'm checking kids' work, it takes me at least a minute and a half to get to every individual slide.
Right.
There's a way to do that. I'll show you. It's quick and
That
easy.
That would be amazing.
Perfect.
Good.
All right, so then we have our Google Meet tools, right? And again, I think these are not as novel as they were when they first came out. Jeff and I were so excited. I think these features came out like 2 weeks, right, before we did this PD. And we thought, oh man, we've got to add these on here. So when you're doing the Google Meet tools, there are polls. And so I'm going to show you how to use a poll, but first I'm going to have you do one as a student, okay? So let me come in here.
When you say prepare them beforehand, that's essentially in a separate Google Doc, and you cut and paste and put it in the poll. Because when I tried to prepare a poll before the class, and I left that class thinking, oh, I'm all set, ready to go, it wiped it out completely.
So correct, George. You can do it 5 minutes before. You can't leave the space. If I leave the meet, my poll gets deleted. So what I might do is 5 minutes before class starts or 2 minutes before class starts, I might come in and copy and paste my polls so that they're ready to go. So that's really what I mean by prepare beforehand. I do have them copied in my speaker notes on my slide deck so that I can come in here and do the poll. But you're right. If I leave this space, my poll is gone. But if I come in 5 minutes or 2 minutes before my class, I can have them there and ready.
And like you said, George, having it somewhere that you're just cutting it from and then pasting it into the poll.
Mm-hmm. All right. So you all should have just gotten a notice, right, that you have a poll that's available to respond. Do you see that?
Yep.
All right. So go ahead and respond to that poll.
No, I did not.
I didn't either.
Where do we
All right.
see?
No problem. Ready? So on the top of your screen, do you see the triangle, the square, and the circle?
Yes.
There should be a green circle. That green circle tells you, hey, you have a notification. Look at me.
And we're looking at the poll.
Yep. And then you'll see polls is the one that has that green circle again. Does anyone need me to repeat where I found it or how I knew I had a poll?
I thought you were going to ask us how old we are.
This is only Meet.
This is all in Google Meet. You have these features.
All right.
And as the teacher, as the initiator of the meeting, you're the only one who can use them. So a student can't start a poll.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Just
so
the
only the
teacher.
teacher can do that.
I'm going to say.
I like that.
All right, so what I'm going to show you also, here we go. And I apologize, you're going to see yourself in double, not my favorite. What you can see on the right here is, can you see the results?
Mm-hmm.
I can automatically see as a whole how people are responding. So again, this is a really quick formative assessment for me to say, as a group, where are we? So let's pretend that it really was 75% of my students are getting the answer correct. Then what I'm going to do is say, okay, then as a group, I know that most of you can move on to the next activity. There's a small group of you I need to work with again. So then the question becomes, well, how do you know who is answering what? Here's the great thing. Google Meet is going to send you an Excel sheet when the meet is over, and it will have every student's name and exactly how they responded to every question. So they're, yep, in the poll, in any question, in the chat, everything, right? So once you start the poll, they're going to send me a Google sheet that says, here's the poll question you asked, here's how the student responded. And so now I'll know what my small group should be. It gives me that data automatically.
And it's emailed to me.
And it emails you. You don't have to ask for it. It just automatically emails it to you. So now the question is, how do I do that, right? So again, as the starter of this meeting, this is what I do. I come here to my activities icon. That's your triangle, your square, and your circle.
Mm-hmm.
I click on that, and I click on polls. And then I just say create a poll. And so this is the question that George was asking earlier. What I would do is maybe 2 or 5 minutes before my session, I would come in here and I would create these polls. So I'm just going to create something different here, gobbledygook, give some options. You'll notice that I have 2 options. I can launch it, which means you're going to see it right away, or I can just save it. So if I save it, you'll notice you can't see it yet, correct? You don't have any green circles on your screen?
We do not.
Yep, and that's because I haven't launched it. So I could prepare them all in advance. And then as I'm ready for each one, I launch them as I'm ready.
As you said, though, you can't leave the meet because then they'll be wiped out.
Correct.
Yeah.
So what I had done was I had tried to do the same polls across all 4 of my physics classes, and I'm typing them in, setting them up, ready to go, and it's like, oh,
Yep. I know.
extreme disappointment. How's that?
You're like, but this should work.
It should have worked.
All right.
Hey, at least you knew about it.
Listen, we're all learning. We're all learning here. All right. Any questions on polls?
No.
All right. So again, a formative assessment. Why? Because I can see who's responding to what. I can see as a class whole how everyone's doing, and I can act on that data. I can do something with my instruction based on the information that I'm collecting.
But the feedback isn't immediate. You have to wait for that email after the poll is closed, correct?
Correct, for the individual. So if I see that 100% of folks are getting it right, I know that, okay, we're ready, right? So I wouldn't have to wait for that data. So I would base my questions in my class, I would time them of where I wanted to move forward, where my, sorry, Jeff, pivot would be in my class. So I might use my poll formative assessment at the end of class so that I'll get that data before the next day. All right, are you all familiar with a waterfall chat?
No.
So waterfall chat is really thinking about that wait time, right? We know that students need wait time, and that's an important piece to any assessment, any formative assessment, any question asking. So when we're using wait time, what we want to do is we want to ask a question, but then we want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to have some time to think about their answer and be able to have their own independent answer so that I'm not going to be influenced by what somebody else says, right? Because I'll just repeat what they say if it's in the chat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you in a moment a picture, and I'm going to ask you to answer the question based on the picture. And I'm going to have you type your answer in the chat. But I don't want you to submit your chat answer until I say go. So this is what we're calling it. I think some people call it 3-2-1 chat, waterfall chat. The idea being that I'm going to see everyone's responses at the same time. Thank you. All right, ready? So select the part of the plant cell responsible for producing sugar. So which of these parts of the plant cell is going to produce sugar? And I want you to type your answer in the chat. And again, do not hit enter until I say go. So I'll give everyone a few moments to think. Now, as you're typing, I'll do a little here. The students are going to be able to see who says what. And so that's important to remember. If I'm using this formative assessment technique, students are going to be able to see it's not anonymous. They're going to know who chose what answer. And so that's just kind of important to keep in mind. However, I do have my word bank up, so that is going to support my ELs. I don't have to worry about my spelling, what was the vocabulary word. I have that up there. So it's also kind of built into this. All right, ready? 3, 2, 1, hit enter. So here we go. Thank you, Jeff. So, right, as the teacher, when I look, what do I see? I see right away everyone's answer. And you'll notice that because they were all up at the same time, I know exactly what maybe you were thinking rather than what your neighbor was thinking, right? Or what the person who did it before you was thinking. Now, is it perfect? No. Can kids wait until someone's answer in before they type it? Sure, they can. It's not, foolproof, but it's still a way to do a quick check on how we can move forward. And then, George, as you were saying, this I don't have to wait until the end of class to find out who it was that might need that assistance. So here, I'd put Justine and Jeff in a small group, and I'd allow George, Leanne, and Gina to move forward with some instruction.
What does it tell me about Jeff?
That Jeff needs to redirect his attention. Maybe he was in a double class. Maybe he's also in his history class or watching YouTube. George, you're muted if you're trying to talk to us.
With this, one of the problems I've had with Waterfall, unlike the poll, which you get the automatic email, if you want to keep this as a document of who's paying attention and what the results are, so you don't have to write it down real quickly, you have to copy and paste out of the chat. And make sure you do that before you leave.
Just take a picture of it.
Well,
screenshot.
And if you also, we're not supposed to record or take pictures of the chats, right? So
I haven't heard that, but if that's what your school is saying, that's what your school is saying, and we're gonna go with that.
When they put that bad F word in there, I send the chat to the principal.
Oh yeah, that's when you wish you could do a record, but as long as you don't leave that meet, you can still copy the whole thing. The problem is if you've got breakout rooms and you bounce in and out of breakout rooms, each time you return to the main meet, the chat goes away.
Right.
Yep.
So that's a detriment to the chat aspect of this, but still.
And again, I think it's right. Like, how am I purposefully using this waterfall chat? So knowing those obstacles, knowing those barriers going in, this might be something that I choose to do where I'm pretty sure that we are going to have a more positive response to the formative assessment. I think most people have it. And so I might use this as I'm just collecting 1 or 2 names. But you're right, George. It's all about knowing what are the barriers, what are the obstacles for each tool, and how am I going to place them and plan them in my classroom. Not every assessment is going to work in every setting. So the next one is the Google Meet tools posting questions. So this is great because students get to post questions, and as the teacher, you can sort them by popularity. You can ask students to answer other students' questions once you have them in there. So it's also a great formative assessment because it allows you to see what students are making sense of. I find, I don't know about you, that my students definitely struggled with asking questions more than answering them. Common you would get the, I don't get it, right? Well, what is it? Like, you be more specific. What are you still wondering about? What are you confused about? Like, let's really try that question. So what I might do is I might show my students this slide here, which could be some sentence starters or question starters if they needed it. So this might be a way for them to start their question if they don't know really where to begin. I'm going to show you how to do this, but for time, I was going to have you watch a short video in Symbiosis, and then we were going to ask some questions based on that. What I'm just going to do is show you how to use the feature in Google Meet, have you practice it with any question that you want to come up with. Jeff, be appropriate. All right, here we go.
Killjoy.
So again, you would go to your activities icon right here. Now you'll notice as students, I have to turn it on. So I go, sorry, let me slow down.
Yes, please.
I go to my activities icon, and then I go here to Q&A. And I have to turn it on. So as the teacher, I have to turn it on. You'll notice as the student, you can't do anything until I turn it on. So now that I turned it on, look, you go into your activities icon. And do you see on the bottom right, it should say ask a question. Do you see that?
Yeah.
All right, go ahead and ask a question about cells, something about cells. All right, so you'll notice as the teacher, I can see everyone's questions. Now, as the student, can you see everyone else's questions?
Yes.
Yes.
This is what's kind of neat about this feature. One, as a formative assessment, I can see what you're asking. So I'm like, okay, Jeff is confused on this one particular organelle. What Gina's thinking about, right, the lifespan. She is thinking about like how are they living things yet? We need to start at the beginning with Justine. So it gives the teacher that information they might need to be able to move forward. What's also really cool is, do you see these buttons, these like buttons like on Facebook? If you have the same question as someone else in the class, would you go ahead and like their question? If you're thinking the same thing, you're not sure about that either, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. So I want you guys to do that. So if you're thinking the same thing, like, oh yeah, I didn't type that, but I also have that question, hit that thumbs up button. Now, what I can do as the teacher is I can sort this by most popular. And so if I use this little caret here and I go to popular, it will tell me what is the things that most people are asking. So maybe everyone goes in and asks a question, but then as a class, you're saying, hey, what is it also that you want me to go over? What is it also that you need assistance with? And all of a sudden, I can see that, okay, I really have to make sure that I talk about the DNA because that's a common misconception for everyone, or that's a common question for everyone. So it's a neat way for them to see and be able to vote, right, on someone else's question. Now, when I hit the check mark, that lets me know as the teacher that I've answered that. I'm done. I don't have to think about that question again. And again, Google Meet will automatically send you a report that gives you all of this information. So you don't have to necessarily make the decision directly right there. All right. So coming back, let's stop and think for a minute. How might we use, could you see using these Google Meet tools even when we go back hybrid?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
These could be good too if you have those small groups and you have that in person with the remote and you turn on that question function. As they're working in a group, have them type in the questions that they come up with. You're going to get that report back. So even though you're not directly there as the teacher, you can get that report sent to you. And now you know what that small group was talking about, right? You know what questions they had. So that's kind of a neat way to use that tool to get that information. And if they do anything inappropriate, of course, you'll get that as well because it will send it. But you could have those polls. So at certain times, you could launch the poll. And so if they're working in a small group and maybe it's 5 minutes before they have to switch, you could launch a poll in your meetings as the kids are in there. And guess what? Now you're going to get that answers back, that formative assessment back in the small groups as well. It doesn't have to be whole group. All right. that was a lot of information. So what we're going to do now is, again, a quick presenter formative assessment.
Okay.
Yep. All right, so quick stress check. In the chat, we would like you to put 0 to 3, like a 0, 1, 2. You see the scale there, 0 to 10. Where are you? We don't have any new information to give you. We've presented all of our information. Remember, the next hour is where you get to use these tools, practice these tools, kind of design a lesson with them. Are you in a good space and you're ready to move on?
Yeah.
Are you feeling overwhelmed, but you still feel like you could move on? Or you're completely overwhelmed, you can't even handle trying it right now because it's way too much information. So go ahead and throw in the chat for us. Where are you on this scale with formative assessments and being ready to move on to the design level? And again, this might be a self-reflection on formative assessment rather than the teacher-directed content question.
What is your name again? Lucas. Okay.
Is that pie? You're at pie, George. You want some pie? Are you hungry?
Yeah, I could.
I wouldn't mind some pie.
All right. So it looks like for the most part that everyone's saying, okay, like it was a lot, but I can go ahead. I'm ready to use these.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to do a quick debrief. Let's say 2 minutes. This is where we're going to have you share out. 1, how can you connect this to your classroom practice? And then really giving Jeff and I some feedback. Did you see us use data to drive instruction? Did you see us use some of our culturally responsive techniques here? Did you see us plan with some UDL strategies in mind? If you don't know what those last 2 bullets are, you could just say that. That's fine. Once we've done that, we're going to share resources with you, and then we'll talk about the next steps. Okay? All right, so I'm going to stop presenting for the moment.
That's
All right. Oh, I have my department head meeting at 12:30, yes. So no worries.
Okay.
All right, does anyone want to share out on how they think these strategies or tools that we showed you today could connect to your classroom practice?
I could see using the questions a lot more.
Yeah, me too.
Because number one, it could be very pointed, and it's essentially an open response. The poll questions are good, but you have to have a specific answer. And if you pose the question the right way, you're always going to get the right answer, so you're always going to look good. So I think the third one that you went through is one that I would start to use more because it's a general way to ask a question and still get good information that can be easily documented.
Perfect. Anyone else? I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said perfect. I'm trying to work on my talk moves. That is interesting, George. Does anyone else want to add on to that or have a different view?
Just ruined my self-esteem.
I'm sorry. Go ahead,
No, seriously, what happens is then I'm not going to offer mine because I can't be as good as yours.
Because you're perfect.
Because if you're perfect, then I'm not going to offer something.
So you weren't culturally responsible then?
I'm trying. Listen, we're all learning.
She didn't tell me I came in last place on all the questions.
I don't know if I got one of them right. False one, by the way.
So exactly the opposite of what George said is because I have 80% ELL in my classroom, the poll would probably be a better option because they would be more likely to choose an answer, whether it is right or wrong, because nobody would know what they were picking.
The anonymity. How do you say that?
I can't say it. Anonymity.
Yeah. So
Anonymity.
I'll do the question because I think that is a better learning tool that motivates their brain in a better way when they have to pose the question. I think that's a fantastic tool. But I think with my students, they would feel much more comfortable doing a poll.
Yeah. And, for me, I would do the posting the questions because on the opposite of you, Justine, I don't have a lot of ELL students in my room. So I think for my group, the posting the questions, and, to get them to ask, they have the vocabulary in order to do that.
I've been a Zoom user, so all this that you're showing me is quite eye-opening for me to now go over to Google Meet and use all of these and try them out.
Nice.
Yeah.
I want to stress too, though, is don't when you're using the Q&A, I do think that our EL students can, but they might need that time, right? So come into class tomorrow with some prepared questions you had about what we did. And so it's just about kind of removing that barrier where they may not be able to come up with the question right away. They're barriers, they need time to think of the language. So let's remove that barrier and say, okay, based on what we did today, tomorrow, you're going to have to ask a question about this content, a question that you still want me to go over. And that will give them time to formulate that so that they'll be ready to copy and paste it right in there, or type it in. So think about like how can we remove those barriers rather than not give them the opportunity to use the tool.
Yeah, but as far as that goes, it's like a Piagetian thing. My kids that are doing phenomenal would sit there all night and write down 10 questions, where the children that don't get it and aren't interested will come back with nothing.
Yeah. It is. It's a struggle. Like I don't want to take that away. I understand the challenge is just trying to, think about how can we make it accessible for everyone.
Yep.
All right, Jeff.
By saying everyone has to put an answer or they're not having break.
All right, Jeff, I am going to leave you. Are you good?
Yeah, I guess I am.
All right. So resources and then the reflection evaluation. And I'm going to go off to my department head meeting.
Have
All right,
fun.
so I can,
Thank you.
All right.
I
You're good?
can share my screen.
Yep, you should be able to. Is it working?
I think so. Beautiful.
All right.
I say beautiful. There it goes.
Mhm.
All right, hold on one second. So this will really be very quick. So there's the resource page. Everyone sees it?
Yep.
Okay, so that's the book that I had mentioned earlier, and that's from a National Science Teachers Association, and that's up here on the left. These are all great tools in terms of gathering evidence of student achievement, ways of doing formative assessment virtually, formative assessment strategies for every classroom, and then just tools for formative assessment. So these were just some resources that I had found that I liked. So next steps, and this is going to be pretty much an optional thing, and I know that someone, I think it was Gina, said that there was a meeting, but we're going to all hopefully complete the feedback form, which I'll show you in just a minute. If you would like to get the PDPs for this, what we were hoping is that you would share one formative assessment with us. So you would try something in your class, you would show evidence of that with a link in the next slide. And if you're not feeling like you're confident with this stuff, then I'll stay on for the next half hour. If you feel like this is stuff you can do on your own, that's great. So this next slide, all you would need to do is to put your grade level, the type of formative assessment you tried, and a link. What went well, and then modifications that you could make. And this will be, we're going to send you the slide deck in the email, which will also include the recording of the session. Any questions about this, this sharing? All right.
Justine, did you have a question?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So you said to put the link, like, so say we take a picture or something,
So
we're going to attach it.
So you could attach a picture. You could have a Google Doc that you want to attach. Maybe you did something and you want to show us the result of the poll, and you would nothing again, not heavy lifting, but
Okay.
just so that we know that you tried it out.
Okay.
Jeff, my question is, can I use a poll that I've already done or a waterfall that I've already done, or do you want it dated from here forward?
Truthfully, George, if you've done something and you feel like it was a good formative assessment, that's fine.
Okay.
If you want to try something you haven't tried before, then great, include that.
Okay.
All right. All right.
And then
then-
I have one other question for you.
Sure.
The book that you showed,
Yes.
are those active links to those 7 things or those things that you had talked about?
So the links are all active. The book
Okay.
I can change so that it will bring you to the NSTA store, and you can get it through that. But the others are all live links. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, we'll start there and see if it's worth it, and then maybe buy the book.
But the book I really liked because it's got, as it says, 75 ways of doing this, and they are all very much applicable to other areas besides science. So for someone that was teaching in a elementary school, you could use them for social studies or ELA or whatever.
Mhm.
All right. So the next